A mind does not struggle for that which it regards as impossible or undesirable. If we feel that crucial aspects of reality with which we must deal are hopelessly closed to our understanding, if we face the key problems of life with a basic sense of helplessness, if we feel that we dare not pursue certain lines of thought because of the unworthy features of our own character that will be brought to light, if we feel in any sense whatever that reality is the enemy of our self-esteem, these fears tend to sabotage the efficacy of consciousness, thereby worsening the initial problem. A mind does not struggle for that which it regards as impossible or undesirable. If low self-esteem dreads the unknown and unfamiliar, high self-esteem seeks new frontiers. We can say that an individual is healthy to the extent that the basic principle of motivation is that of motivation by confidence. The degree of motivation by fear is the measure of underdeveloped self-esteem. Self-esteem is an intimate experience. It resides in the core of one's being. It is what I think and feel about myself, not what someone else thinks or feels about me. This simple fact can hardly be overemphasized. I can be loved by my family, my mate, and my friends, and yet not love myself. I can be admired by my associates, and yet regard myself as worthless. I can project an image of assurance and poise that fools almost everyone, and yet secretly tremble with a sense of my inadequacy. I can fulfill the expectations of others, and yet fail my own. I can win every honor, and yet feel I have accomplished nothing. I can be adored by millions, and yet wake up each morning with a sickening sense of fraudulence and emptiness. The tragedy of many people's lives is that they look for self-esteem in every direction except within, and so they fail in their search. The ultimate source of self-esteem is and can only be internal, in what we do, not what others do. When we seek it in externals, we invite tragedy. The more one turns up the volume on one's inner signals, the more external signals tend to recede into proper balance. This entails learning to listen to the body, learning to listen to the emotions, and learning to think for oneself. We pursue and maintain our values in the world through action. It is a person's actions that are decisive. What determines the level of self-esteem is what the individual does within the context of his or her knowledge and values. And since action in the world is a reflection of action within the mind of the individual, it is ultimately the internal processes that are crucial. In virtually all of the great spiritual and philosophical traditions of the world, there appears some form of the idea that most human beings are sleepwalking through their own existence. Enlightenment is identified with waking up. Evolution and progress are identified with an expansion of consciousness. We are beings for whom consciousness at the conceptual level is volitional. This means that the design of our nature contains some extraordinary options. That of seeking awareness, or not bothering, or actively avoiding it. That of seeking truth, or not bothering, or actively avoiding it. That of focusing our mind, or not bothering, or choosing to drop to a lower level of consciousness. If we do not bring an appropriate level of consciousness to our activities, if we do not live mindfully, the inevitable penalty is a diminished sense of self-efficacy and self-respect. We cannot feel competent and worthy while conducting our lives in a mental fog. Our mind is our basic tool of survival. Betray it, and self-esteem suffers. Through the thousands of choices we make between thinking and non-thinking, being responsible toward reality or evading it, we establish a sense of the kind of person we are. Consciously, we rarely remember these choices, but deep in our psyche they are added up, and the sum is that experience we call self-esteem. Self-esteem is the reputation we acquire with ourselves. Consciousness that is not translated into appropriate action is a betrayal of consciousness. Living consciously means more than seeing and knowing. It means acting on what one sees and knows. Living consciously is living responsibly toward reality. We do not necessarily have to like what we see, but we recognize that wishes or fears or denials do not alter facts. If I desire a new outfit, but need the money for rent, my desire does not transform reality and make the purchase rational. If a statement is true, my denying it will not make it false. When we live consciously, we do not confuse the subjective with the objective. We do not imagine that our feelings are an infallible guide to truth. We can learn from our feelings, to be sure, and they may even point us in the direction of important facts, but this will entail the participation of reason. Living consciously entails a mind that is active rather than passive, an intelligence that takes joy in its own function, being in the moment without losing the wider context, reaching out toward relevant facts rather than withdrawing from them, being concerned to distinguish among facts, interpretations, and emotions, noticing and confronting any impulses to avoid or deny painful or threatening realities, being concerned to know where I am relative to my various goals and projects, and whether I am succeeding or failing, being concerned to know if my actions are in alignment with my purposes, searching for feedback from the environment so as to adjust or correct my course when necessary, persevering in the attempt to understand in spite of difficulties, being receptive to new knowledge and willing to re-examine old assumptions, being willing to see and correct mistakes, seeking always to expand awareness, a commitment to learning, and therefore a commitment to growth as a way of life, a concern to understand the world around me, a concern to know not only external reality, but also internal reality, the reality of my needs, feelings, aspirations, and motives, so that I am not a stranger or a mystery to myself, a concern to be aware of the values that move and guide me, as well as their roots, so that I am not ruled by values I have irrationally adopted or uncritically accepted from others. All of us can look back over our life and think of times when we did not bring to some concern as much consciousness as was needed. We tell ourselves, if only I had thought more, if only I hadn't been so impulsive, if only I had checked the facts more carefully. No one lives entirely unconsciously, and no one is incapable of expanding his or her consciousness. Once you identify the areas in your life where you are at your most conscious, and also the areas where you are your least conscious, the next step is to reflect on what seems to be difficult about staying in high-level mental focus in the troublesome areas. If you choose to be more conscious at work, what might you do differently? If you choose to be more conscious in your most important relationships, what might you do differently? If you choose to pay more attention to how you deal with people, associates, employees, customers, spouse, children, or friends, what might you do differently? If you feel fear or reluctance to expand consciousness in any of these areas, what are the imagined negatives you are avoiding? If, without self-reproach, you bring more consciousness to your fears or reluctance, what might you notice? If you wanted to feel more powerful and effective in the areas where your consciousness has been less than it needs to be, what are you willing to do?